God, we're in London. We are so excited. Thank you so much, everybody, for coming. We just can't even tell you how thrilled we are. In fact, I think I'm going to cry.
Oh, come on. This is their most fraudulent act yet. And so these things are the things that bring on excesses of emotion in a woman who otherwise is just an iceberg. Just getting away with shit is what really steams
Really
her
makes
beans.
me emotional.
It does.
No, it's just so absolutely wonderful to be here. And we haven't seen each other except for last night. I've been here a couple of weeks. Crabb's
Except
been
for
here
last
a few days.
night, which was amazing, by the way.
We went to Cabaret.
We did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which was fantastic. The Kit Kat Club. There's nothing, of course, that would make you feel like more of a fraud about your own show in London than going to see Cabaret.
That's why we decided to get there, just to really lower expectations of our own completely, useless piece of...
I mean, Crabb is going to strip and dance backwards on that chair shortly.
I actually am, because this is quite warm up here, so I'm going to just slowly take off my jacket. But I don't want anyone to read anything into it. The cool thing... Okay, so... the cool thing about London is there's so many shows on at the same time. I know that's a massively lame thing to say, that all Australians say, sort of like, how good's the tube? Oh, every 3 minutes. Whereas, of course, proper London people are like, oh, God, it's supposed to be here 1 minute ago. What's going on? It's like, this is amazing.
No, last night was amazing. The venue is...
The Playhouse, otherwise known as the Kit Kat.
It was quite extraordinary. But I did a bit of Googling of Cabaret today because it's quite...
What a surprise.
The stage show is quite different to the film. And I discovered that, so the song...
She's been issued a time limit for this. Because...
Wait till you hear what else I've been Googling.
Oh, I can't wait. I'm going to remove my jacket while you're talking about this.
Okay.
I feel confident that I'll have long enough to partially disrobe, if I may split an infinitive while you're doing this. Yes? Okay.
The song Mine Hair, which everyone well, not everyone, but most people are familiar with, right? La da da da, mine hair. Was written, it wasn't in the original musical, it was written for the film. And then the song was so fantastic that they then incorporated it into the musical.
And I'm back. Yes.
Okay.
So last night there were new songs that I didn't recognise from the film.
Yes.
And that's part of the development of the show, right?
The show existed before the film.
I know, but like...
Some of the songs were not used in the film.
Oh.
And then, it just Google it yourself.
Look, this chemistry is really working nicely tonight, I'm finding. The thing, though, when I walked in, that I thought this is already superb, is the use of the physical space of the theatre. So I haven't been to that theatre before, the Playhouse, but my God, it's kind of like there's a round stage, and it's almost like they are steeply vertiginous seating areas, a little bit like this one, but like more complicated and more kind of like grottos.
Yeah.
And there are like lots of little goat tracks, and the performers, like the dancers in the Kit Kat Club, are out there just doing their thing as you walk in, and there's a cabaret seating area, and it's just like, have they rebuilt this theatre?
Yeah, can anyone tell us what did the building used to be?
It's like
what was it? Can anyone
it feels
yell
like
out?
a series of blobs, it's the most amazing.
What was it?
It was always a theatre, but the entrance has changed.
Right.
Oh, okay. Rightio.
And then, but like, is the stage always like that with sort of like these curving, rippling kind of... I mean, I realise that I'm engaging you to a point that you had not anticipated, but like, it was just, wow. And
the whole show tonight's about building structure.
it is.
Hope you're all happy you've come.
We never quite know what it's going to be about, but it's going to be about this.
So I've seen a couple of other great things while I've been here. I won't belabor them.
Can I just, before you start in on that, wardrobe at the cabaret show, wardrobe.
Well, that actually segues beautifully to my next thing, but the wardrobe was fantastic.
I will just say, because you can't stop me, that, if you've seen the film, and of course, who could be, in that production after Liza Minnelli, unfair, but the wardrobe there is very kind of black and white and pointy in the Kit Kat Club, but whoever the genius is in charge of wardrobe for this production has gone all sort of like browns and leathers and fringes and
floaty things. And
it's so good. It is really
good.
Tremendous work.
Okay, well, we're on fashion. Naomi
Go.
Campbell, A Life in Fashion at the V&A, which I also went to. Oh, God, I just love a show like that. It really, as you know, and as listeners of the pod will know, I love a fashion show because I just love looking at the clothes. But this is probably the first show that I've seen where I've actually really got a great understanding of what an amazing model brings to the clothes, because they had the clothes from her private collection, the ones she's kept, and then they had all that they borrowed from elsewhere, and then they had photos of her modelling them. And there are a couple of dresses that you go, that's all right, that's like a nice dress. And then they'd have the shot of her in it and you'd be like, oh my God. So it really was actually useful in terms of helping illustrate that. And then the other thing that's on at the V&A...
When did you book for that, by the way? Because we tried to go and they were like, yeah, this is where you would normally buy tickets, but also there aren't any.
Months ago, Annabelle. The other thing that I went to at the V&A, which is also really superb and I recommend, is Fragile Beauty, which is photos from the private collection of Sir Elton John and David Furnish. And they have the most extraordinary collection. It's kind of like what you'd expect, but just the absolute best of it all. So there's a lot of there's celebrity photography, there's a lot of homoerotic stuff, Robert Mapplethorpe, people like that. They've got
Is that labelled the homoerotic department?
It doesn't need the label. It's fairly obvious.
It's like, this is the $50,000 worth of flowers a week, and this is the homoerotic area.
And then they've got a brilliant collection of, you know, that like 1950s and 60s American documentary photography where it's suburbia?
Yeah.
They've got amazing work from that era. They've got some fantastic contemporary news stuff. And then there's a few bits and pieces of Elton, not a lot of personal stuff, but there was this one that I thought was so fantastic, which I think the photographer was Mario Testino, and he's clearly been assigned...
Probably, yes.
He's clearly been assigned to go and get a portrait of Elton John, and all it is a massive close-up of hands crossed like that with rings. And I swear to God, even without knowing it was Elton John, if I showed you the photo, you'd go, that's Elton John. Like, it just, you can tell, and he's just captured, it's that thing that great photographers do where they capture the essence of somebody, and amazingly, it's just all there in those hands.
Lord of the Rings. Fantastic. So, just to annoy you, I went to the Natural History Museum and saw the birds exhibit. Because...
Oh, wonderful.
I'm not going to talk about it for very long, by which I mean only 10 to 20 minutes. But, I mean, the Natural History Museum, just by definition, fabulous. I like the fact that in the birds exhibit, whoever put it together put the tits next to the boobies. That made just... I just love the silent hand of a curator that's just gone there. And it reminds me of this, like, we lived in London about a decade and a half ago, and we went once for a weekend to the Cotswolds, and we went to a birds of prey sanctuary. It was for my birthday. So we got to play with all of the owls that were infesting the English countryside after the Harry Potter movies came out and every kid wanted a goddamn owl.
Oh, yes.
Yep.
I remember when this happened.
Yeah. And then they had these giant European owls that are like 50, 60 centimetres high and terrifying. And of course, after you've tried to look after that with your kid for a week or two, you of course release it into the countryside, whereupon it goes and kills lambs and then has to be captured, and then it goes to live on this sanctuary. It's best holiday ever. But also, we stayed in a B&B. This is like pre-Airbnb, it was just a B&B. And we were staying in the attic room of this place. And Jeremy and I were sort of being shown around. It was lovely. She was a very obvious twitcher, this lady, the hostess. And so there were like little bird nests and houses and holes everywhere. And I said to her conversationally, so what kind of birds do you see around here? She went, oh, tits mainly, great tits, crested tits, blue tits, lesser tits. And Jeremy and I just like... one of the greatest moments ever. So anyway, the bird exhibit is just about, you know, cool stuff about birds. And I'm going to tell you one cool thing that I learned about birds, apart from the boobies being next. I already said that. And that is that there's a tiny little hummingbird called the Anna's hummingbird, and they've got a sort of little replica model of it there. Its heart rate when it's flying is 1,200 beats per minute.
Wow.
But it gets tired very, very quickly. And so when it gets tired, it can dial down its own heartbeat when it's cold or when it's just had enough. And it will be on a twig and its claws auto-lock and it goes into something called torpor. And its heart rate goes down to 50 beats a minute and it will just hang there.
Wow.
Sometimes it tips upside down because it's so relaxed, but its little claw keeps it going. And then when it's kind of ready to go again, it'll just reboot. Isn't that cool?
Wow.
Yeah.
Very cool.
She's so into it.
I love nature.
Yeah, you do love nature, don't you? But you've been seeing some nature.
I have actually. So I have been spending some time out in the country, in the Cotswolds, and then I went down to Cornwall with my friend Claire.
She's like Bear Grylls. She's been to the Cotswolds.
There's one thing I want to raise with all of you locals, and it's about English country roads. So thank God my friend Claire was driving is all I can say. So we were supposed to be on, I think it's the M40, and there was a massive accident and traffic was stopped in both directions. You couldn't, basically, they weren't allowing you on, so we had to go into these back roads. So we get to this kind of very skinny road, which immediately I'm like, wow, this is a skinny road. It must be a one-way road. And then a car with a trailer is coming the other way. And so Claire basically drives so far to the side of the road that we are in the hedge, and then I was like speechless, like, what? We're in the hedge. Anyway, the dude kind of comes past, and I was in Australia, I would have been like, yeah, and then it's like they
Sorry,
get,
how would you spell that?
They would have been cross. Anyway, Claire and this dude get kind of level. I swear, I don't know how they weren't bumping into each other, other than the fact that we, as previously mentioned, were in the hedge. He was in the hedge on the other side, and then they wind their windows down. They're like, "Oh, it's squeeze, isn't it? Oh, yes, it is." And everyone's like super nice to each other.
And were you just giving them stink face?
No, I was just like, I just can't believe this. So we kind of go on, and then I'm like, "Wow, that was, geez, I'm glad I'm not driving." And so then 5 minutes down the road, we get it into another snaffle like this, same thing, into the hedge, terrible. And so then after a while, because the traffic's so bad and the road's shut, I say to Claire, we just keep, every time we get through one, I'm like, oh, thank God, we've passed that. Whew, that must be unusual. Anyway, then we keep hitting them. And so eventually I say to Claire, I guess these roads were designed in the era of just when people were riding like one single horse or something, because this is just bad. Is this normal? And Claire goes, oh, this amount's not normal. Anyway, we go around a corner, and as far as the eye can see, up a road that's probably skinnier than me, cars, and then I can see at the top that like people are getting out of their cars, and that there's just like there's hedges, but they're like packed sort of tight, so no one's got anywhere to go. So by now I'm like, what? And so I say to Claire, are there people behind us as well? And she's like, oh yeah. And so then I just said, I think we're going to die out here. It's just absolutely terrifying.
Leigh Sales died 2024 of road narrowness.
I don't know what I was expecting, but I wasn't expecting that. And then Claire, for her troubles, very kindly gave me, because we were going to Cornwall, some Daphne du Maurier to read, which I'd never read. And so I decided I'd start with Jamaica Inn.
Did she have like a coat with just like a bunch of Daphne du Mauriers? It's like cheap watches. Hey, just fell off the lorry.
She did. So I start reading Jamaica Inn, which is really a great, kind of pacey thriller, and it was a perfect choice by Claire because it's very atmospheric for where we're at. But then, unfortunately for Claire, what it got me thinking about was because there's lots of talk of the Moor and Bodmin Moor and all the mad people that go to the Moor and the criminals who hide in the Moor, and it got me thinking...
Nobody should ever go to a Moor. I learned this from seeing American Werewolf in London way too young as a kid. Like I went to you're nodding, I can see.
Does it live in a moor?
Mate, I'd never seen a horror movie before. I never even knew that a horror movie existed. My oldest friend, Wendy Sharp, is in the audience here, so she knows that I went to Juliet Giangregorio's birthday party. It was like her 8th or 9th, and her dad had hired a video recorder, and they went American Werewolf in London. I'm like, hello, like, Jesus, oh my God! And I spent the entire movie under Juliet's bed.
Well, I was thinking about, so when I was a
Bad
kid...
things happen on a moor in that film.
Famous Five, they were always traipsing around moors.
Oh, yeah.
The Secret Garden Moor, Wuthering Heights moors. And then I just thought...
Heathcliff. Don't even start me.
I thought, I don't actually know what a moor is. So I said to Claire... look, I'm sorry about this, but I'm afraid tomorrow you're going to have to drive an hour so we can go to Bodmin Moor because I want to have a look. I want to eyeball it and see what it is.
Just thank you, Claire, wherever you are in the audience. Like, where are you? There she is. Yes. Thank you. Last night at Cabaret, by the way, I ran into Claire and she said, oh, yeah, no, Leigh's been massively into Cabaret for years. I'm like, well, that is bullshit because she had never seen it until I nagged her to inside the last 12 months. Jeez. Anyway.
So I say to Claire, you've got to drive me to Bodmin
Moor,
Moor, which was absolutely in the middle of nowhere, and all the signs plastered all over the place.
Definitionally, that is where a moor is, by the way. Yeah.
Well, and all the guides say, do not go into this location if you are not capable of using a compass, which, because like the mist rolls in and stuff apparently. Anyway, I was like, we're going in, Claire. So we went in. It was absolutely amazing. It was desolate, but also really, really beautiful. And then I Googled like what actually is a moor, just for anyone that wants to know. It's low-growing vegetation, which is uncultivated. It's pretty wet and boggy, and there's lots of stuff, like low-growing bush and stuff. And then that got me wondering, but I'm going to save it for like a to be continued. Then I thought, what's a heath?
Nobody tell her about Pete, for fuck's sake, because we're going to be here all night. Oh, that's the end? Stay tuned for the next thrilling adventure in
that was
expanses in the British landscape.
My key observation about England so far was just those roads. That's what's really going to stick with me.
Okay. You are a creature of surprise. I went to the Barbican and I saw an exhibit by Francis Alice, who's like a video artist. I don't know, it's on the 3rd floor of the Barbican. It's very hard to remember where the Barbican is or get into it, but like there's a lovely conservatory there, and this exhibition is super, super worth seeing. It's called, oh God, this is good, isn't it? It's a selection of videos of children playing. Like that's what this artist does in part, goes to like really interested in how children play, including in war zones and places where kids don't have much to play at all. And it's like probably the most powerful thing in the whole collection. There's heaps of them. They're kind of in a big space mainly, so you get this sense of child babel happening. But there's this one called Haram Football, and it was shot in about 2017, I think, in Mosul, in Iraq. And it was about 2 years after about a dozen boys had been executed by IS for watching a Iraq-Jordan game in the street on a television, and which is horrifying enough. So 2 years later, there's these kids who are in this wrecked street in front of a wrecked mosque, and they are playing football. And they're wearing like Western footy shirts and whatever. And for about the first couple of minutes of the video, you can see them like they're kind of incredibly intent the way kids are when they play street football. And then, I don't know, gradually the camera angle kind of allows you to start seeing their feet. And you realise that they don't have a ball. Oh. So, and they don't, and you think, are they kicking a rock around? Like, what's happening? And they're not even kicking a rock around. They're just all pretending that there's a ball. And it's so intense. And they all introduce themselves by name at the beginning of the video, which you just think, Jesus, that must be like a frightening thing to do. At one point, the ball goes into this bomb crater, and a kid goes down there to find the ball, and they're all standing around going, like, watching as he searches for the ball, and you're like, that's the ball. Wow. It's, like, anyway, like, a lot of the videos are less full-on, and in fact, there's just a bunch of great ones, and the most overwhelming element and sort of touching element, even though a lot of it is like kids playing in really rough circumstances. Like there's one in the Ukraine where all these kids are just, it's called sirens. They just imitate the sounds of bomb air raid sirens. And there's another one where it's called Password, where all these Ukrainian kids are setting up road checks where they like pull over cars and they check like the occupants, and they ask them for the password, like the adult drivers of these cars, and they ask for the password, which is the Ukrainian word for bread, which I'm not going to attempt, but it is very, very hard, this word for Russians to say. So it's the test of, are you Ukrainian or are you Russian? Oh. And the amazing thing is that all the adults who pull up and wind down their windows are, it's so moving. They smile and they know what's going on and they know the password. Oh. And they're all like, the kids are like, can I see your papers? They're like, absolutely. You know, what's the password? And anyway.
That sounds amazing.
Yeah, it's incredible. And there's because, I mean, the artist did this sort of collaboration with Barbican because, of course, the Barbican was like just bombed till it was level. And so there's a bunch of British kids playing in the schoolyards around Barbican. And there's this incredible video of these little girls playing conkers, you know, where you like tie a chestnut, you know, is chestnut, isn't it? Horse chestnut, thank you, God. Nearly a horrible blunder.
Putting that next to Heath. What is a horse chestnut?
We could actually make a show that is Leigh Sales last Googled, I think. And it actually would be worth it.
I think Claire was thrilled this afternoon after I Googled when I went to her and I said, Claire, in the Googling of Moors, I've got like a list of the Moors of the world.
Oh my God.
She's terrified. I'm going to take her on.
There'll be a cruise coming up. A bit of walking on this
the
cruise.
Kontiki Moors tour. There's a lot of hookups on those.
Dear God. Anyway, these kids, like these two girls playing conkers, are just, they are like Vikings. They are not smiling at all. They are smashing their horse chestnuts into each other. Their knuckles are bleeding. It's like, it's full on. And so, anyway, the seriousness of play is just like, anyway,
well,
it's absolutely superb exhibition. And thanks to my sister-in-law, Mariam, who's here, for recommending it because it was a great recommendation.
Excellent, very good. I think we should maybe haul our guest out.
Oh, okay. So, can't even tell you how excited we are because, I mean, we're playing the great hits. This is our 10-year anniversary show. That is the... That is the absolutely paper-thin excuse that brought us here. And one person that we've talked about extensively over the entire 10 years of the podcast, apart from Helen Garner. We've got friend of the show, Brian Schmidt here, who's, you know, well, I mean, like, we like to have a Nobel Prize winner at all points, but I mean, you know, he's done some very weird shit for us over the years at the ANU and always been lovely about it. But a person with whom we have been, I think it's fair to say, mutually obsessed, and I read her obsessively when I lived here 15 years ago, was MARINA HYDE of The Guardian. Right? I mean,
yeah.
A person who just, even 15 years ago, and she was writing a column on politics, a column on celebrity, a column on football. I'm thinking, how does she not run out of amazing stuff and still, 15 years later, just never runs out of gold?
I think of, I've got obviously multiple friends with whom I trade, like, oh, did you see this in the New York Times today? Did you see this in the Times? You know, whatever.
Because she's a wanker.
There's probably... there's possibly not a more shared columnist than MARINA HYDE, and it'll pop into my WhatsApp. Have you seen what Marina's filed today? It's on fire. I want to read you a little bit of. It's really hard to kind of come up with my definitive MARINA top 5, but this one certainly...
She's Googled it a lot.
This one certainly is one of my all-time favourites, which was a column that she wrote in May 2017, and it was about an article that appeared in GQ, and it was the first big in-depth thing that Brad Pitt had agreed to do after the demise of his marriage to Angelina Jolie. And the piece in GQ was called Brad Pitt in America's National Parks. And it was this...
I'm crying already.
Absolutely baffling spread of Brad Pitt in which he did... It was written in that kind of style that what do I call it? It's the men's magazine style. It's like, something bro style. I remember I coined that, whatever.
You did coin it, but not... You didn't super coin it because I can't remember what it was.
It was
like, stop trying to make fetch happen.
It was kind of like cool bro, hoodie bro sort of style. And so it's all, Brad's got his, his coffee plunger on the table and, he's wearing a Ralph Lauren sweater tied around his shoulders, like this kind of just utter wankery.
Talking about how he's starting to do carpentry because it's,
my God.
Yeah.
And there's a grab of Brad where he's talking about the inlay on his sideboard and he says...
That's a euphemism, by the way.
He says something like, that inlay, my kids don't care about that. It doesn't mean anything to them. I just hope that one day it might mean something to them. Okay. So Brad just basically is in just painful detail going into his personal life. It's just absolutely gobsmacking the amount of detail that he shares. But the thing that is the most baffling about it is the photo shoot that he's agreed to, in which, again, in GQ style, all of it's captioned with, Brad, Ralph Lauren jumper, $350, Gucci socks, $700, whatever. But
you think you can get a Ralph Lauren jumper for $350. It's the sweetest thing about you.
But he's lying. They've taken him to various national parks, and I can only describe his poses in several of the photos as adopting a pose like lying on white sands, like I adopt when I've got gastro, like this. And then the article, the thing like, Tom Ford brogues, blah, blah, blah. But then there's one, the most inexplicable one at all. I strongly urge you to Google this and Moor's when you leave. It's Brad, he's holding his own jacket like this. And it's just utterly bizarre. Anyway, Marina wrote a piece dissecting it. I'm just going to read you one paragraph from Marina's piece.
I love that we've got real Marina right here. Actually have the carbon-based life form that produced all this, but we're just like, oh God, here's another fucking great thing she wrote.
I'm just building the excitement. Okay, so Marina writes, at one point, Brad explains to the interviewer, I went through 2 therapists to get to the right one. Yes, the right therapist is so important, and I am thrilled Brad burned through a couple of duds before apparently settling on one who would greenlight his decision to discuss the intimate details of his private life while hawking Ralph Lauren in a dank cavern. Oh, yes, Brad, I think this is a really positive move for you, but I would like final approval on the knitwear. Would you please welcome Marina Hyde?
Come, that is for you.
Hi, guys.
Dear God.
An honour.
I can't even.
How about these girls? How about these girls?
Are you ever scared when you write something like that you're just going to be at, Marks and Spencer the next week and run into Brad Pitt?
I'm constantly worried about running into him in M&S all the time. It's never happened, but I mean, things do seem to be going slightly down and down for him. Eventually, I could see him in a fitting room. I now believe it's possible. I didn't when I wrote that, but now, yes.
Now that I've planted the seed.
But you sort of occupy this kind of a place that's almost like a terrorist in British journalism, right? Because, I mean, there really can't be anybody that you haven't been mean about, I think.
No, luckily I don't socialise with anyone.
Right, okay.
But that is the thing. You see, if you do hang out with them, and there actually has been there's been a really long stretch in British journalism of like people who are friends with kind of all the people in the government, and then they kind of hang out with them and sometimes go on holiday with them. I mean, what?
Right.
But anyway,
like weddings and best men
stuff
and
like
stuff.
that. Whereas I don't know any of them socially, and I want to keep it that way.
Like remember the the Murdoch daughters Jordan shoot with Tony Blair? Remember with the
Yes.
white? Everybody wearing white. It was
that's
like,
actually, and then we
that was
discussed, and then
unbelievable.
Yeah, well, Mr. Tony Blair kept himself out of that. I think it was actually that story. Someone went to maybe Hugh Jackman's flat down in Woolloomooloo or somewhere like that.
Everyone's going to Hugh Jackman's flat at the moment.
Everyone's going, and they saw a photo of the christening and was like, wait, hang on, I've seen these pictures in OK Magazine, but I didn't see Mr. Tony Blair in them. And he was like, oh yeah, he's the other godfather. But also, why are those the godparents of Murdoch's children?
I just think
don't you know anyone other than like Tony Blair and Hugh Jackman?
I think that the godparents
mental.
chosen by like absurdly famous people are always just nuts, right?
I think Wendy chose them. That no longer together.
Do you think?
Sadly. Yeah.
I'm always very suspicious of famous people whose other friends are only other famous people. I mean, notwithstanding that Prince William's here as my +1 tonight.
Yeah.
But, no, it's a bit.
You go way back.
We do. And I do also think that people in our line of work can't do our jobs properly if we are friends with the people we're writing on, because inevitably you're going to pull your punches.
There was a Guardian, right back in the day, there was a Guardian theatre critic who also wrote about politics, and he always used to say, he was called Neville Cardus, really, this is like going right back in the old days, and he said he would never like to meet any politicians because it would dilute the purity of his hatred. And this is the truth, you see. The thing is, though, if you have hung out with them and you've gone out to drinks and all, for me, I would always be like, I'd be very British about it, and I'd be like, it's just a bit awkward, isn't it? Whereas if you don't have anything to do with them, then you could just call them absolutely ridiculous things and it doesn't really matter. And you can just... But I know I would pull my punches if I, hung around with them. Also, I would have to hang around with them. So, like this is the double blow.
True.
Although British Prime Ministers have had such a turnover in the last sort of decade. I mean, we thought that
we're
in
like
Australia,
you guys.
we were the asset recycling scheme that was definitive internationally until,
We really tried to show you how it could be done. Because I have a big weakness for your politics, you see. Every now and then, even during like the mad years after Brexit, which was so many years, I would occasionally dive into the hashtag in Twitter, which I really enjoy, Ozpol. And for outsiders, it's like, whoa, well, I mean, I'm feeling a little bit better about the things that have happened in Westminster today. They've done what? They said what? I really enjoy it. You'll always get something absolutely... It's a mixed bag, isn't it?
Well, this is how we met, because you were writing something about Tony Abbott being appointed to the British Board of Trade, and I was like, did you want a bit of background?
She wrote to me, can I tell you about the time he ate an onion?
I just thought there were gaps in your knowledge.
Hi, I love you. Yes, you can.
The best thing about that was when he bit into the onion. It was on a Tasmanian onion farm. So he was doing a tour of... I mean, I'm not going to get too deep into the nitty-gritty of the policy detail here. Let me just say that in Tasmania, farmers who want to export from the mainland face bigger costs to get their vegetables across the strait. And so there was a freight equalisation scheme conceived to make...
It's all making so much sense now.
Tasmanian onions.
Of course he ate an onion.
Less disadvantaged, than their mainland cousins. And so to celebrate, Tony went there and ate an onion in front of the onion farmers, who were shocked. They were just like... The guy's just like, what? Fantastic.
Speaking of former Australian Prime Ministers, reminds me of a story that I forgot to tell you, which was when we were in Cornwall, absolute middle of nowhere. We get in a taxi with this taxi driver. He drops us back where we're going, and his name's Mike. He goes, would you mind if I told you a story quickly? Because he picked up that I had an Australian accent. I went, sure. So he goes...
Been waiting for decades to tell this story.
He goes, so I used to drive a CEO, and I was often in London, and, I'd have to drive him to meetings. He's a very important man. He didn't name the person. And he said one time he was at a meeting at the Goring Hotel, which is this kind of old, you'll all know, it's like this old
It's not far away.
Isn't it? Right. Seems like a bit
Goring,
of a real...
not Goering, I assume.
Goring Hotel.
Just saw Cabaret.
Seems like
no umlaut. Crucial.
Seems like a bit of a Rule Britannia kind of establishment. It's like Kate Middleton slept there the night before she was getting married and so on. So kind of posh, sort of vibes like that. Anyway, so he goes... I've taken the CEO to a meeting at the Goring Hotel, and then while I'm waiting, I go into the toilet. And I'm at the urinal, and then there's a man standing next to me, and there's all these like photos on the wall in the toilet, and I'm kind of looking at them. And the man next to me goes, some interesting photos here, aren't there? And he said, I glanced at him, and I thought, oh, I know that. And he said it was an Australian accent. He thought, oh, I know that person. I've seen that person's face. He's thinking, is he an actor? Is he something? So he goes, I think I know you. And the man goes, I'm John Howard. I used to be the Prime Minister of Australia. And so he's like, oh my God, wow. Anyway, then a couple of years later, he's somewhere and he's walking up some stairs and this man's walking down and it's John Howard and he recognises him and he says, before I could kind of stop myself, and as I'm speaking, I'm like, oh, you absolute moron. He said, I go, you're not going to remember me, but... And John Howard interrupts him and goes, you were the guy in the toilet looking at the photos. And that story had the absolute ring of truth because Howard is well known, as you know, for his unbelievable recollection for faces and names.
That is true. Even today, if I run into him, he's like, how's Jeremy and the kids? I'll be like...
It's unbelievable.
Amazing.
So it just... And also the location is the kind of place that John Howard would have been at. So it all just
Does
had...
this guy have like a narwhal horn or something?
It was extraordinary. It was extraordinary. It was just such a great story.
He's obviously now just a sort of Howard PR machine for people who get into cabs. Anyway. We're dealing with the Moors. I'm sorry, Marina.
You've been on Bodmin. Yes, very good. Yeah.
No, it was sheer luck that good luck for us. You probably went, oh, I'm so busy. How do I get roped into this? That we lined you up for a pod straight after the British election.
Mercilessly emailed her like a year ago. So we're just like fenced her in to the point where even though she's been in Brighton today and she's got an early start tomorrow and she had an early start today and she still showed up because she's adorable.
Because why wouldn't I show up for you guys? Come on.
Thank you.
But yeah, there's never been a better... Yeah, the British election is over. It lasted 37 years. The entire thing could have been done in an email. Both the main parties actually lost support during the campaign, so it would have been better if, every time they got out, they took a haircut. So it would have been better to have done it on an email. And what are your elections like now? You're going to have one.
Yeah, but ours aren't set, so they could be any time.
Well, now ours can be any time. We had like 15 minutes where it could have to be at a fixed term, and then they realised that didn't work for them, so we don't do that anymore because it's worked so well. All the others have been working so well for us.
So the day that Rishi Sunak realised that it was about to really piss down and thought, I might just pop out,
I don't know what to tell you. I don't know what to tell you. It was, it's too on the nose. Everyone just sat there watching thinking, this is so mad. But, I guess at some level he was thinking, because he was delusional about where things would go and that everyone would start, that he could turn things around or that he could turn things around to a much less sort of bad extent than they ended up. And I think he just thought, people will respect the fact that I am getting absolutely pissed on here. And people will say, that's a guy who goes out and it doesn't matter, he sees things through. But everyone was just like, you're a dick, where's your umbrella?
Do you think, is there a bit of a Biden thing happening there where it's just like, I'm just the guy who just keeps battling on, even though everybody's just laughing
I feel like
at
the
me?
Biden thing is a unique thing that is... For me, not pleasant to watch at all. I mean, and I'm not one of his aides. I mean, if you're there, those guys in the wings every time, you're just thinking, the stress of it, you're actually creating diamonds inside of you because you're so scared. Just let him get off, say the thing, and then just get off. But it has been obvious for a long time.
Would it be mortifying if I read a bit of your Joe Biden column from a couple of days
ago? No, it wouldn't.
Okay.
It wouldn't.
I just want to read the opening.
I would be mortified.
It was so good and
Breathe through it.
Yeah. Okay. The Joe Biden re-election campaign is now a situation where you want to put your hands over your eyes, even when your hands are already over your eyes. Like mine, all your sets of hands may have been clamped tightly to your lids since Biden's franchise-killing performance in the first presidential debate 12 days ago, which his press secretary incredibly hand-waved away by stating he had a cold. A cold what? A cold sweat? A cold day in hell? A cold dead hand he'd like you to prize the nomination out of?
Leigh, it's all of the above, isn't it?
It is. And look, honestly, it'd be funny if it wasn't so just disturbing.
Yeah, it is, obviously, I would say, obviously, everyone's got their own views. May have a couple of Trump voters in tonight. I feel it's unlikely, but you never know. I would obviously vote for him if I lived in the US, but morally, I would feel quite bad about voting for something that I think has been obvious to many people. Weirdly, I was watching TV, I was watching CNN in the kind of 12 hours before the last vote in 2020. And I was watching it with one of my children, and he got off a bus and he gave a really discombobulated speech. I've now discovered that the ratings for CNN are, I always assume 120 million people are watching this. Apparently it's 70,000. So I was one of them, and I was like, what? Did anyone see that? Maybe not. So the answer is maybe not. But it was, and I remember thinking, that's really bad, but it's the end of a long campaign, and I quite understand it, and he is, obviously getting on a bit, and it's hard. But it has been obvious now for quite some time, but this is what the Democrats do. They don't make any plans.
So
they just hope for the best.
This is a phenomenon.
Because they're good people, and good people win, right? I mean, no, guys, no. You must remember the time before, and the Republicans spend forever packing every court, everything, to circuit things right down at the bottom, and they build it up for years and years, and then they're like, "Hi guys, we pretty much stacked this deck. What's your plan?" And they're just well, we're just going to go again with this guy.
So I'm just doing the best as he can, and that's the whole idea, right?
Yeah, well, they also said that. As long as I've done my best, then I think that's all right. It's what? Sorry. But actually,
It's not high school maths.
Yeah.
I'm going to talk about some of these themes in a minute when I talk about this book called Willful Blindness, which is a really good read.
Yeah.
But before we go on to that, I did want to ask you, Marina, just total 180, about what I binge-watched on the plane and have been watching since I got here, which is the television show Clarkson's Farm, which I know
and you should find a way to wiggle this in, probably while you were here,
which is a massive hit.
Yeah. Okay.
It's a massive
if it
hit
was on,
with old teal jacket over here.
Yeah,
she can't talk about anything else.
So
she's on a clock. She's not allowed to spend more than 8 minutes on this. All right.
Okay. So I'm sure some people here have watched it, and I'm sure everyone here probably has a strong opinion
by the way?
about Jeremy
Has
Clarkson.
anybody here watched it? Okay,
yeah.
Okay.
It's a terrific show.
If that was on free to air, it would be the highest rating show on TV.
Okay.
It's on it's on Amazon, but it's still very high rating.
Okay, so my sum total, I suspect Jeremy Clarkson's less famous in Australia than he is here. So my first encounter with Jeremy Clarkson was on Top Gear, which I watched periodically and thought was a really good show. And then I'm sort of aware, every now and again he pops up because he says something controversial. I don't read his column. And then I saw Clarkson's Farm and it had good word of mouth, and so I watched it. So as I'm watching it, I'm thinking, God, this is a fantastic show. I know I'm supposed to hate Jeremy Clarkson. I can't remember why. So I go to
She's waiting for the Clarkson's Moor franchise to really take off.
So I go to Wikipedia and click on the controversies, and so I start scrolling. It just never ends, basically. It's just an endless array of things. So before we kind of talk about the show, so what is Clarkson's deal? So I assume
he says what he thinks. But the thing is, and he had a show. Obviously, he had Top Gear, which was a great show, which is a sort of brilliant. But I suppose lots of things have changed now, and he's bought this farm. He's now, by the way, also bought a pub, which he'll do a spin-off show on trying to make that work, because pubs are just absolutely dying on their asses here, and it's really hard to make money out of them. But he will make it brilliant. But the cause before was, cars, which is I don't know, it's not worth dying for, is it? But now, what's amazing about this is that it's a way for him to talk about all sorts of things. So this guy, before he was the sort of person who probably denied climate change, all sorts of things like this. And now he's no, this is really, you need Clarkson to do all that. The show is absolutely brilliant. It's a brilliant producer, Andy Willman, who's an amazing producer and did Top Gear. But they've really found something. What I find really interesting about that sort of show is that farmers absolutely love it, because they're this is what it's like, by the way. And he tries to be not a complete idiot abroad in it, but the gentleman amateur, I think it's fair to say.
Exactly.
So my
And the
reference
thing
point is all creatures great and small, but I guess it's sort of like, has it moved on from me? Yeah. So put arm up, boom, trouble at top paddock.
Yeah.
So the thing that I think Clarkson is funny, but the thing that absolutely makes it is the cast of surrounding characters who work on the farm.
Yeah.
And I heard on your podcast that you do with Richard Osman, The Rest is Entertainment, so Caleb is this young guy who I think in season 1 he's about 20. He is unbelievable. There's nothing he doesn't know about farming. He is utterly extraordinary, and he's got this great personality.
Is it possible he just seems that way to you because you don't know much about farming?
You see him. He's fixing tractors. He's delivering cows. He's playing. He can just do everything.
Well, that checks out.
But then,
have you met my dad?
But then, he's like one of those people. But he's only 20. He clearly does not mix at all or come from. Nothing that Clarkson has currency in kind of means anything to him. So he constantly will be saying to Clarkson, God, why are you such an idiot? And he just kind of constantly puts him in his place. But he's got a good-natured sense of humour. But every now and again, too, he'll say something just so gobsmacking. Like, he reveals in, I think, episode 1 that he's never been to London. Oh, sorry, the only time he's been to London once was on a school excursion, and he was so freaked out he refused to get off the school bus. And so it was just, he's the most amazing person. And then there's these other people, like the vet and the farm manager, and they're all just absolutely superb.
It's brilliant. And he hired them not with a view to making Caleb was already there. He hired them with a view not to making a TV show. So Clarkson, I mean, if you told me that there would be a redemptive arc and everyone would be like, Clarkson, he's saying there are some good things, but you need someone like Clarkson to say lots of this stuff.
Yeah.
Because people will believe it coming from him.
So
People now understand much more about farming who have absolutely no interest or understanding about farming and how hard it is.
Absolutely. I feel like I know how to plough a field myself, having watched this show.
You could 100% go out and do it.
But you've got to take a Valium just to drive down one of those roads, but I mean, like, baby steps, baby steps.
Oh, I'd be terrified if a tractor was coming the other way, even if I was on a bicycle. But so when I was watching it, so initially I was watching season 1 and I was enjoying it, and then I season 2, because I knew I was going to talk about it, I started to analyse why is this working? And actually, I think it works not in spite of Clark, because Clarkson, he doesn't come across as someone that we would be mates with. Like, he does seem a bit kind of annoying, but to put it, not too fine a point on it, he
doesn't care about being like this.
He doesn't.
And that's a skill.
Right? But the show works not in spite of him being a twat. It works because he's a twat. And the shows that it most puts me in mind of and the feeling it gives me when I laugh are Curb Your Enthusiasm with Larry David and Louis, starring Louis C.K.
Yeah.
And the reason is
another cancelled guy who's never going to get another show in this town again until he does.
The reason is
he's got a Grammy now, so since the cancellation, so he's doing okay.
You take some kind of perverse pleasure in watching mishaps befall Clarkson. So when he's being chased by a cow and he's like, I'm being attacked by a cow, it's just really funny because it's happening to Jeremy Clarkson. So that's kind of partly, I think, why it works. But also, I mean, it's interesting that you raised the producer, because I've been watching it and just going, the producer of this deserves a medal. It is so well produced.
And the one about the pub will also be, because these are sort of things people don't really understand about how the food gets to their table at all. And people go into pubs and don't quite understand why they can't make any money since they're paying so much money to have a pint. So he will explain it all, and people will understand these things. But it's a really pretty amazing pivot, because he left the BBC under a big cloud. He punched a producer, but he has actually been in touch with me and Richard and said he'll tell us the real story behind that. So when I know more, so will you.
Can I just take a moment to say, if you're not already listening to The Rest is Entertainment, it absolutely should. I don't know how this lady gets to, find another pocket of time in your week to do another thing, but I mean, Richard Osman, who's, of course, Sales has banged on about extensively. And in fact, backstage we're talking about, Marina, you need to come to Australia. And bring Richard. I'm like, and bring Richard. Anyway.
I'm going to drag him to Australia.
But he's just down there and he's
the stuff that, I don't know, the sort of obiter dicta of your experience in the entertainment industry really feeds through in this podcast, because you're talking about things that you kind of like, that people do watch and read about, you know, news shows and whatever, but you're feeding them all this information between the cracks, you know, just...
It's really weird. People love knowing the
behind
behind
about
the
the
scenes
industry
thing. But
is very, you know, I mean, it's
we're lucky
useful.
that we're talking about in a darkening world. That we're in a darkening world.
In a darkening world.
We're talking about the fun stuff.
Yeah.
The things that we escape the darkening world to. You know, the books, the TV, the movies. So I mean, in general, it's not sort of super high stakes, but it's just quite fun. And I think we all need that more than ever. I do anyway.
You had a really interesting episode. I won't occupy you for long on this because I know Madam wants to move on, but like... you had a really interesting episode a couple back where you were talking about the impact of the last few months, which has been election campaign and Euro 24, and your own personal exhaustion, obviously, because I think Rich was finishing a book or something, or
Richard
on a
was
deadline,
finishing his
and
new
you
book,
were
and I was
doing
filming a TV show. Yeah.
So ridiculous. But you were talking about the impact of podcasting on broadcast, on both football and politics.
Well, don't you guys feel that? That I think it's quite... Well, I mean, now we're in a circle of trust. It has had because obviously it's relatively sensitive, this arena, but people who, for instance, present the football but also do football podcast, it's quite interesting, and I think they'll have to make a decision at some point, because... and also people who present news podcasts and then go and present for the BBC, they've all said, it's really hard. You sometimes the tone has changed. Podcasting is obviously totally different. It's a conversation. It's supposed to feel friendly and authentic and just, you know, more freewheeling. And then people like Justin Webb, who also do the Today programme, say, and then suddenly you realise you're doing it on the Today programme and it's the morning and you're doing... Do you guys find that?
Well, we never talk about when Sales gets diarrhea, on the actual...
on the ABC.
But
No.
It's a common thread.
Yeah, you just can't do that.
We've been very careful to we don't really talk in the pod about stories that we were reporting on, or so we tended to very, very occasionally we might, like if there's been an election or something major, but often what we would talk about is the behind the scenes, like, oh my God, we just had to be on air for 8.5 hours on federal election night or whatever, but we don't talk about the content.
But has it changed your tone when you're on the ABC?
I've always tried to have a very conversational tone, because I always think that I should be feeling like I'm your friend talking to you through the TV. I'm your serious friend in the context of my television
your idiot
show,
friend on the
and I'm your idiot
podcast.
friend on Chat 10.
But also, one interesting thing that we've done, and this is a 10-year thing. So, one thing that we weren't really anticipating about the podcast is that there is a big Facebook group that goes along with it.
You've got a whole load of... You've got a community/cult, which I love.
Yes,
which I love, and I'm part of.
It's a closed cult too, because you have to answer questions to get in, and they're quite hard questions. But
I can furnish you with the answers for Richard Osman.
I feel like he's going to be getting a buy into this anyway, but
he'll get in. But the weird thing is, and neither of us is big on Facebook generally, but this group is sort of ridiculously large and very pleasant to be, people to be among.
A complete rarity on the internet, let's face.
And one of the reasons I think is that at the very beginning we said, well, nobody can talk about politics, and we've got this brilliant moderator and band of Brendaling moderator volunteers who really enforce that, and and I think the result is people show up and know that they won't have to have a fight with somebody about some bullshit that's going on. I can go elsewhere and do that. The main reason is because
over the last
10 years.
Although my reason
anywhere and have a fight about politics.
But the byproduct has been just a place that's pleasant to hang out.
Although my recent declaration that I enjoyed Clarkson's farm was somewhat...
every now and again a cultural...
Was that regarded as a political statement?
Well,
pretty much. But this is what I... Okay, so can I go on another monologue? Sorry.
Yeah.
Okay.
Why not?
I want to
go for it.
Okay, so
are you up for your right still awake?
I'm very keen to hear this.
Okay, so Willful Blindness is a book. I met this lovely woman called Nicola when I was down in Deddington, and we got chatting, having this interesting chat, and she was talking about this book, and it sounded really interesting to me. I love books about how our brains work, and so she just went and got hers and gave it to me, which was just so nice. So I started reading it, and it's really, really fascinating. So what it's basically about is that the fact that often big failures in life come down to not from things that are hidden away or in secret. They're things that are right in front of us, like Joe Biden's cognitive decline. And for whatever reason, people kind of choose to not see it, or they maybe aren't even aware that they're choosing to not see it. And so, later on people will say, let's say their spouse has been cheating on them, they might say, oh, how could I have been so blind? Because there'd be, so much evidence in hindsight. And so this book is about how does that happen? So how does it happen individually in our brains, and how does it happen, say, collectively in companies and so on? So I just wanted to read you this little bit about it, which is, it's a study looking at it's talking about a study looking at how we adjust our thinking processes to avoid uncomfortable feelings like anxiety, uncertainty, confusion, just contradiction and so on. Hang on a sec. Need my glasses. And so they did this study in 2004 where they had a look at how we are doing this, right? And so this team recruited 15 committed Democrats and 15 committed Republicans to submit to MRI scans of their brains while they were reading political material. As they lay in the scanner, they read pairs of quotes attributed to either President Bush or presidential candidate John Kerry. In each pair, one statement was entirely compatible with the candidate's position, but one statement was contradictory. And so what the researchers wanted to find out was, would the brain treat the contradictions of the preferred candidate in the same way that it treats the contradictions of the disliked candidate? What it found was that the partisan participants gave a far rougher ride to the contradictions that came from the candidate they opposed. They had no trouble seeing the contradictions for the opposition candidate, the researchers wrote, but when confronted with potentially troubling political information, a network of neurons becomes active that produces distress. Not only did the brain manage to shut down distress through faulty reasoning, but it did so quickly. The neural circuits charged with regulation of emotional states seemed to recruit beliefs that eliminated the distress and conflict. But the brain didn't stop at eliminating the uncomfortable contradictions. It worked overtime to feel good, activating reward circuits that give partisans a jolt of positive reinforcement for their biased reasoning. And so in the experiment, the reward circuits the brain was using were the same that are activated when a junkie gets a fix. In other words, when we find the thoughts we agree with, or we're able to eliminate the ones that make us uncomfortable, we get the same kind of euphoria and reassurance that addicts feel when reunited with their drug of choice. So, all is right with the world. So if I can use the example of, say, Clarkson to illustrate this.
For instance. Or Moor's.
I thought we weren't done with him.
You knew it.
This is where Marina's like, I've been up since 4 a.m. Oh my God. Okay, so when I said before that I really liked Clarkson's Farm, and when Marina said Clarkson's Farm, it was a fantastic show. If you despise Jeremy Clarkson, that will have sat really uncomfortably with you. One, because you might think something like, I would never watch that show because I hate Jeremy Clarkson. That's a way for your brain to process, it gets rid of an uncomfortable contradiction, which is two things can be true at once. Jeremy Clarkson can be a bit repellent, but he also might have made a good TV show. That doesn't sit very comfortably to have to hold both of those thoughts in your same head. And you also might have thought something like, well, I like MARINA HYDE and I respect her judgment, and I like Leigh Sales. I can't believe that they would like Clarkson's Farm. And then in your head you will have come up with some possible, or maybe not, maybe you now hate us.
Maybe he gets chased by a cow and it's fun to watch him being humiliated by a cow.
That's exactly what I've done. I've found, the reason I like it's not because I like a problematic individual, it's because the comedy comes from, right? So that's what I've done to justify to myself how I can like Clarkson's Farm. And you might be saying, well, Sales and Hyde, well, I guess, you can't always agree with people on everything, but they're mostly pretty good. And then your brain, you will rapidly forget that we've said that we like Clarkson's Farm because it'll be contradictory. But then, if you're the kind of person who doesn't like Jeremy Clarkson, chances are you might be the kind of person who really likes Julia Gillard. Now, do you remember that Julia Gillard, when she was the Prime Minister, refused to do anything, introduce legislation to back same-sex marriage? And she publicly said that she would not do so because she believed that marriage is between a man and a woman. Now, I suspect if you're a fan of Julia Gillard, you would think, oh, well, she had to say that because otherwise she would have been rolled by her colleagues. So
she was being chased by a cow at the time.
You will have found a way to forgive Julia Gillard, but you'll be holding Jeremy Clarkson's things against him. And that's what that study shows. And I found it very fascinating.
So, okay, A, I'm going to read this book.
I'm definitely getting that.
Right? So the Biden thing right now...
Perfect example.
One thing that I found absolutely extraordinary in the last 24 hours is that George Clooney's written a column for the New York Times where he just says, look, I love this guy. I'm a Democrat. I've raised billions of dollars, blah, 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 blah. Love him like a brother. He's got to go because he's not up to it. And every single senator and congressperson I've spoken to in private, without exception, has said that they are not confident that this man can contest the election competently or be president. And that is every single person that I've talked to, no matter what they're saying publicly. Why is it, I'm directing this question to you, Marina, why is it that a Hollywood actor can somehow articulate something that the people whose job it is...
Because the stakes are so low for him. I mean, he's just he's just someone who pays out. I don't think he should be offering any opinion on it particularly.
Oh, really?
They've all come out. They're on a strike now. They're on a no check strike. They're all saying like Barry Diller. All those people are like Damon Lindelof, showrunners. They've all written these articles saying, "Oh, we're not going to give you any more money." It's like, well, he's already come to Hollywood on his fundraising round, so I don't think he's coming back again. But they can say it because it doesn't impact them in any way, and because they look like they're casting them. George Clooney is the leading man in his own story of saving the election in that way, and I think it's much easier for them to say it than if you depend.
Correct, though, isn't
if
it?
you're one of the down ballot Democrats, there's a much more complicated system of funding on which lots of people are depending, and they all don't feel they're able to say it. And also they feel that maybe actors have a sort of simplistic view of how the process would play out. And maybe they do. I mean, I have to say I probably think he's right, but...
of all the people that have been touted as a potential, last-minute, spin-the-wheel presidential candidate...
Clooney.
No. They've done an actor.
But they've done a bunch of actors.
They've done one actor, and they've done a television presenter.
Right.
That may be getting another go.
But I mean, this is starting to look like a pattern, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember one of my favourite Maureen Dowd columns ever was back when Obama was sort of struggling in his first campaign, and Maureen wrote this column saying, look, the big problem for Obama is that he doesn't have a surviving Democrat, elder, statesman, former president that he can really go to for advice, because Jimmy Carter, nuts, and Bill Clinton hates him. So, so she approached Aaron Sorkin and had him write a scene where Barack Obama consults with Jed Bartlett for advice. And it's actually a terrific piece of advice, and it's a great scene. And also, Maureen got to get somebody else to write her column, which is
the dream.
The dream.
Bill Clinton, of course, is another perfect example of willful blindness,
right,
because everybody knew that Bill Clinton was pants man, but all the feminists of the day were happy to kind of not say anything because the view was, well, he's got great policies for women, he's got a female Attorney General, he's got a female Secretary of Staff. And so when the Monica Lewinsky thing blew up, it wasn't like, we would respond today. There was a certain level of, well, he's our guy, so just got a willful blindness.
Definitely. I do think that they have reevaluated it
absolutely
in the wake. My friend of mine wanted to write a show about people reevaluating their relationships in the wake of Me Too. Her father had been her mother's headmaster. But they were married for 25 years. It was a whole thing. And then afterwards, but then when Me Too happened, her mother kept saying, well, that was me, of course. And she was like, yeah, but you were married for 25 years. And she's like, that was me. And so she thought it would be good to do as a sitcom, obviously, because she's quite dark. People who've just having to rethink everything that's gone before. And I really think that, like, the entire of the Clinton years.
Oh, yeah.
It's just like, I have to draw the veil.
Yeah.
The willful veil has gone over 8 years there.
It's kind of weird, isn't it, that it's really quite recent history. So that sort of stuns me to think, my goodness. And I guess in some ways it's good to think, wow, we actually, because sometimes I think it feels like progress isn't being made, but I think, well, it definitely is being made, because I just don't think that the same attitude...
we wouldn't have thought the same thing anymore.
I've seen Monica Lewinsky interviewed.
She's terrific. She's become an amazing, and you feel, everyone felt like, oh my God, everyone was part of making stupid jokes, or all the sort of people who would be kind of, she would no longer be the sort of, the target of the joke. She might be the subject of the joke, but the target of the joke would have been the president. But in fact, she was the target of all the jokes.
She was the Jay Leno, monologue every night for months. And I feel bad about that, because I remember watching it and kind of laughing along. But I remember seeing her interviewed somewhere once, and she was asked whether it would be better or worse for her now with social media.
Yeah, I think that's
and
the
she
only
said,
unknown.
this was like gripping. She said, because you sort of assume surely it'd be worse, because every pub galah with an internet connection would be even more into the story. And she said, I think it actually might have been better for me, because in the space of 1 week I went from being a person who maybe 150, 200 people might recognise visually to a person who was recognisable to the entire globe. And she said there was nothing about me that was independently available, no insight into my character or into what I was like, apart from the stuff that was being fed out by people with agendas. Yeah. And of course, in that whole time, she's just like locked in this apartment crying. She said if I'd had a Facebook page or something, people might have been able to see that I was. She said I was less pudgy and more funny and smart than you thought. And
but also you would have maybe found a constituency of people saying, by the way, I think this is really awful. Yeah. And there were I'm trying to remember back, but I was pretty young, but there were feminists who were saying this is really wrong, and it's really. But
they were
just
some, but they were isolated.
They were isolated and regarded as sort of food, and
kooks.
They were kind of letting down the team, I think, was the view, because this is our guy, the tribal kind of thing. And I guess maybe that's a bit of what's going on with Biden. Well, we are seeing it's going on with Biden, right? Which is, well, we've got to get behind this guy because that's who we're committed to.
Yeah, get on board or shut up. And there is always that the peril is so great from the right or whatever the enemy is at any one time, that everyone has to sort of just fall in, because otherwise you're disloyal to the Democrat cause or whatever it is. But no, I think she would have found, you're right, but I think it would have been so brutal, I can't even imagine it.
I mean,
but
she came here to go to university and then couldn't get a job because nobody would hire Monica Lewinsky, just because it's just too much of a PR issue, just like, ugh. Who could deal with that anyway?
She's an extraordinary
person.
I think.
Really,
I agree.
It's such
so
an funny and resilient and interesting person.
So, Marina, one thing we often talk about, say if we're at the end of a holiday or a trip or whatever, is what we've been reading on planes. And so, firstly, what's your kind of? Do you read on planes? Do you watch TV? Do you just try to sleep? What do you tend to do on a long plane trip?
No, I like to. Yeah, I watch TV or I read, and I know I never can sleep on a plane. I just can't possibly sleep on a plane. I never sleep on planes at all. I like to read, but I'm excited because I'm going away soon, and I'm going to take lots and lots of books away with me, because now my children are a little bit older. I can, there was a point where I was like, I'm not even packing anything. There's no point. But now
that's a dark period, isn't it?
Yeah,
when they can still run away and fall into things.
Well, it's like when you go to bed, I could either read or I will be having a bottle of rosé. So I think I would always choose the,
do you
on my
take
holiday.
Hard copy books or Kindle?
Oh no, I've never read a book on a Kindle. No, and I never will. No.
But you
I
could
have
take
hard copy
70
books.
books with you.
But I don't want to. I want to turn over the corners of the page of things that are important to me. And then when I want to go back and think, where was that line I read? I will find it in the book because it will be one of the 30 pages in that one book that has its thing turned over. It's a system and it works for me.
Also, when you remember where there's a good bit, do you remember where it is on the page? Like I was.
Yeah, I do.
It's like a
Yes, you're
left-hand
right.
page and it's near the top. Yes, right. Okay, and it was near a break in the paragraph. Yes, that's
And there it is.
Doesn't
yes,
work on
I
Kindle.
do. No, and I always go back to them, and there's lots of sort of interesting little bits. So I always make sure non-fiction. I always take too many. I never, obviously, that
Sure,
would be
absolutely.
a nightmare.
Because what if you got gastro and couldn't go out anywhere and you just only read? I mean,
It's
like
possible.
that is, and, you know, it
Exactly,
happens,
it
right?
does
I mean, it
happen.
does happen, as I understand it. I read a terrific forthcoming book on the plane. Actually, I try to watch. I think I'm going to watch a movie on this long haul flight, and my intentions are so good and strong, and then I realise that when I attempt to watch a movie on a flight, what I actually do is spend 14 hours just going, nope, 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 nope. I just can't make it work. So I prefer to read. And I got in early and I read a book, a forthcoming book by Evie Wilde, who's a much decorated Australian writer, called The Echoes. And I mention it here because I think in this audience, there'd be a lot of people who'd be right into it. The storyline is about this young woman called Hannah. It's a very tough kind of regional existence in Australia. She kind of escapes her difficult family and moves to the UK and falls in love and buys an apartment with this man, Max, who dies. I'm not spoiling it because the book is partially narrated by his ghost. So it's a bit of Patrick Swayze kind of, but like respectable, because this is a prize-winning author. And look,
Patrick Swayze is respectable. I'm
Right.
sorry, I'm just going to have to interrupt this.
just
Don't mean to lower the tone, but he is
Defend.
respectable. Rest in peace. Defend him? I don't need to defend
Patrick Swayze doesn't require defending.
nobody puts Patrick in a corner.
Nobody. Nobody. Anyway, carry on.
Look, there's a few, she has a tough childhood life, so if you've got any problems with, there's a bit of like a sort of sexual assault backstory, so, just know that that's part of it. But far out, it's such a great book.
I must have been living in a cave, because when you said much decorated Australian writer, I've not heard of her.
Yeah, she won the Stella Prize a couple of years ago. I mean,
What was the book?
She's kind of like, she's terrific. I think, it's such an interesting and original concept. I mean, I know it sounds weird to have a ghost as a narrator, but it really works. And I know I sound like a crackpot when I say that, but it really does. And it's about regret and about things that people in a relationship don't tell each other, particularly about their backstories. And it's also about this young woman kind of coming to terms with these sort of grim things that have happened to her in her childhood. It's also about people like escaping that to go and live somewhere else.
Did you say it's called The Echoes?
It's called The Echoes,
Okay.
yeah. So it's handled here by Cape UK, I think. It comes out in early, like the 1st of August, I think. But in Australia, so if you're listening to this, it's Penguin and available same date. It's terrific.
So I did 2 things on the plane, 1 book, 1 TV thing. I watched...
That's fair.
4-part...
Were both of them about Moors?
a 4-part documentary called Willie Nelson and Friends.
Okay. So this is the sales thing. She doesn't do... No. She's like, okay, documentary about...
Willie Nelson. I love Willie Nelson. I've always loved Willie Nelson. Thank you, whoever just clapped. He
fine.
deserves it. He's in his 90s now, and I like the sound of his voice, but I really didn't know anything about him at all. And what it made me think about was singing and songwriting as storytelling, and just the reason that his voice is so compelling is because he uses it as a really amazing storytelling tool in the way that he phrases things. He recorded the song You're Always on My Mind, and there was a woman who was interviewed, I can't remember, which country singer. It's not Emmylou Harris. It's no one. It's not Dolly Parton. It's not anyone like super famous. Anyway, she said she heard the song. She thought, well, I can just nail that song. I'm going to have a massive hit on my hands. She recorded it. It was beautiful. Wasn't a hit. And then 5 years later, Willie Nelson re-recorded it, and then it was probably his biggest hit. And she said she heard it and was like, oh, wow, that's the story of how that's the story of the song. That's he's told the story correctly.
Right. It's like when Johnny Cash recorded that cover of the Nine Inch Nails song, Hurt.
Oh, yeah.
Which is, I mean, I always just thought, this is a Johnny Cash song. No, it's a Nine Inch Nails song that Johnny Cash just happened to really put in the slot.
Those guys really know how to tell a story. But the other thing that I found incredibly... I mean, Willie Nelson's had a really interesting and quite tumultuous life, but the thing that I found the most moving in it, he's got this guitar that he calls Trigger, and he bought it 70 years ago for $150, and he has played it so much that he's worn a second sound hole in it, in the body of the guitar. And you can see when you watch him playing how he's done it, because you can see these two fingers kind of hitting the bit, and so the wood's worn away, and so it makes the guitar, has this kind of unique sound that's unique to Willie Nelson. But when he's sitting there holding it, I swear to God, it looks like him. It looks like part of his body. It looks like a pet or an extra bit of his body. It looks old, because he's in his 90s. Like, it looks old and beaten up. It's kind of... I know this sounds bizarre, but it's like got similar colouring to him. And they interview his band members, and the band members say, if anything happens to Trigger, it's all over. Like, and you can tell by the way Willie Nelson talks about the guitar. I mean, he could afford any guitar in the world, but he plays this beaten up old guitar. It was so incredibly moving. And he goes, when that pops up on a streamer, have a look at it. The thing I read, because I knew...
Can I just say, she actually felt exactly the same way about David Beckham's jumper cupboard. So, like, just...
Did you watch that, Marina?
The Beckham book?
Yeah.
Yeah, of course.
I mean...
Of course.
Have you read the book? Yeah?
No, I'm not a huge fan of the author. Honestly.
It's advertised everywhere.
But a friend of mine's just reviewed it, and what I love is... But I love how I have read sections of the book, and the author is so insanely consumed with loathing and jealousy of them. I mean, the fact is, they're still married. I think they quite like each other.
Right.
I don't feel like there's a mega story there. I mean, it's quite interesting the way the brand has been done, but I'm not, they're still at it, and I think that's quite good.
Yeah, I agree.
My favourite bit about the doco was when, like, Victoria was being... interviewed about her struggle street childhood or whatever.
Yeah.
And she was talking about her dad dropping her at school, and David Beckham's just lurking in the door.
Yeah.
He's like, what car was it? What car was it? What car was it? What car was it? Was it a Rolls? Was it? Was it? She's like, yes. And he's like, thank you.
The cleanliness of the kitchen was what got me, my God.
Yeah.
So because I knew I was coming to the UK, I thought, right, I am getting one of those books off my bookshelf by one of those great British writers that I haven't read and that you see sitting there and you're like, oh. So I read...
Dickens.
No.
I heard the cry go up. Yeah. Like, no, you haven't read
Was
Dickens.
it Dickens, Leigh?
Just like Dickens.
Was
So,
it Dickens?
There was a
there'd be a
writers'
lot of-
festival
there'd be a lot
once
of Moors,
in Sydney
I bet.
where she confessed... Well, she just said, for instance, I'm never going to read a book by Charles Dickens. I haven't, and I know I never will.
I'm going to run out of time.
Exactly. There was this sort of intake of breath, and I thought at the Sydney Writers' Festival the mood was actually going to turn ugly. It was going to be like the rites
soured.
of spring with people just ripping up the seating and then the next time we did a live show, the president of the New South Wales Dickens Society was there to ask a question. Anyway, sorry, back to you.
No, I didn't go for Dickens. I went for The Sense of an Ending by Julian Barnes, which I had never read, which was a beautiful book, won the Booker Prize in, I think, 2011. Kind of a novella, actually.
Yeah.
It was short.
Short. Which
Yeah.
is what everyone ever wants to hear.
A bit, not dissimilar themes to what you were talking about memory, regret, decisions that you've made in your youth and then how you view them in your later years. It was really a very fine piece of work.
Oh, he'll be pleased to hear that.
Yes.
Like, definitely.
Julian, if you're in the room, well done, mate.
That is an author I am a fan
fancier.
of. Yeah.
Can I, because I know we're nearly out of time and, you will have to sleep at some point, a couple of tips for things that are coming up here that will happen after we've left. I was in the tube there. I was in the tube the other day. How good's the tube? And I saw a poster for Fangirls, which is this Australian musical.
Yes, I want to go and see it. Is it brilliant?
It is so great. And I didn't even know it was coming here. So it was written by Eve Blake when she was like 19 or something. She's still just
And
very
Sonia
young.
Friedman, who's a brilliant theatre producer, is bringing it over. And I read about it in an interview and thought, I don't know about this. I'm going to go. Is it brilliant?
Well, I didn't know about it, and I saw it in Sydney, and I was just like, this is unbelievably great. And then we took children and friends, and it's really, how old's your,
My eldest, I've got 13, 11 and 10.
Oh yeah, they can all go.
Yeah. We will go.
It's incredibly cool and fun, and just brilliant writing, great music, full of energy. Everybody's just sort of up out of their seats. It's, and not in a corny way, just like, this is so cool. And part of the cool thing is, I don't know, I just think when you find a young writer, a composer who just knows how to do it somehow, just knocks it out of the park, it's exhilarating.
I will definitely see that.
So yeah, Fangirls. I think it's opening tomorrow night or within days. Yeah. Saturday, yeah. Anyway, go see that. The other thing that is coming right up after the break is, Virginia Gay, friend of the show, who rewrote Cyrano de Bergerac as a sort of gender kind of upended version. That lady is just a creature of joy and is in rehearsals right now here in London. It's going to Edinburgh for a month, I think. And then there's sort of sly talk of London maybe later in the year. You can keep in touch with that on social media at Cyrano Live, which when you look at it briefly and glancingly, it sounds like a new kind of olive, like Syrian olive. I'm quite interested in olives, so I'm like, oh, what's that? But it is at Cyrano Live. We'll give you details of it. And I went to see in Sheffield this week, Come From Away, which
Oh yes.
Oh God. Similar thing where I missed it in Sydney. It had 2 seasons in Sydney, and people were like, you've got to go see that. And do you have this thing where the more people tell you that something is fabulous...
Oh, yeah, you'll be the last holdout.
Yeah, exactly.
You're like,
so
I won't
I've
see
never
that.
read Wolf Hall, for instance, because too many people have told me how great it is. I'm like, how good could it possibly be? I know at some point
Breaking,
I'll read
it is quite good.
And then I'll be the world's worst pub bore. I'll be like, Sales, have you heard of this? Like, the Wolf Hall. It's fantastic. But anyway, I did eventually see Come From Away in Adelaide, and my brother-in-law, Jamie Zulfiker, then got cast in the touring UK production, which is why I went to Sheffield to see it, and far out. It is a balm for the heart in these troubled times, MARINA HYDE. Yeah, in these dark times.
So good.
Yeah.
2 shout-outs. One, did you all get to meet Gwen Blake outside at a merch queen? Well done, Gwenny. Thanks, Gwen, for schlepping an extra suitcase full of merch. And I just wanted to thank all of you for when we floated this balloon that maybe we could do a show in London for the podcast 10th anniversary. We really sort of had no idea who would come. We thought, I came to London, I think, in 2018, and we put a thing in the Facebook group to say, if any chatters in London want to come to the pub, Leigh will be there at this time. And then we had to get a private room because 60 people came. And so we thought, we think we could get some people to come. But the thing that's made this such a great joy for 10 years, just in spades, is the people who listen and all of you. It's just really, really so special and such an unexpected development in our lives. So thank you so much for coming tonight and for the great thrill that you enabled us to come and do a show in London. Thank you, MARINA HYDE. What a great thrill to have you. Thank you very much.
It's a dream. We're living the dream. Okay, so this is Look, this is so cheesy and lame, but I'm going to take a picture of us 3 with you in the background and it won't work and it won't matter. It'll be lame and dumb, but can I do that?
Absolutely.
All right, because, sorry. What do you want? Oh, we do have a... Oh, hi there. Mr. Stephen Blake. Every beautiful photo that you ever see of all of us is Stephen Blake. Oh, well, look, yeah, all right.
Okay. Can you see the crab?
Thank you. Thank you very much. Miss Marina Hyde! Thank you. Thank you so much. Heist of the century. Heist of the century.